Everyone here says it's 5 o'clock. I hereby call this special meeting of the Concord County School District 2 Board of Trustees to order. Katie Walker, will you lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. As you guys can see, there's only 2 main items on the agenda tonight. It's the discussion of a variance and then some personnel issues.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the special meeting agenda as presented.
Moved and seconded to approve the special meeting agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 3, we'll discuss and consider applying for a variance from the state and county health requirements. First, we'll start with Dr. Copeland giving us a little background, and then I'll open it for audience input. We've obviously got some input via email or phone calls. Dr. Copeland will do some of that. If you do provide input, please raise your hand and stand up and come forward and let us know who you are, and keep it to maybe a couple minutes at the most. And also don't we don't want to hear this. We're welcome to all the input, but don't say the same thing exactly. Whatever. So that would be great. So with that,
Sure. So just a little background. Last month, the board discussed this issue a little bit at the regular meeting and decided to set up a special meeting to kind of further discuss it. But at that meeting, they asked me to go back, talk to the admin team about what everybody's feelings were at that time. Also to direct them and any of us to get informal input from interested parties, whether they be parents, staff, whoever wanted to have an opinion, and then to come up with basically what are some options that we could discuss. So, so shortly after that, I think it was the next Wednesday after that meeting, we did have our regular admin meeting. So we discussed it, and the principals, the admin team basically felt like that we had 7 or 8 weeks left of school, or however many we would have after the variance would be granted, whatever time that took. And they were basically concerned with changing the routines, but mainly just the possibility of quarantines. And they're here, and they can certainly comment if the board wants to, and I'm very quickly summarizing the thoughts that I remember. We've been told, and I've talked with Amanda Brandon. Thank Amanda, she's also at the meeting on Zoom, and so we can get her to clarify some things. Because, to be quite honest, this whole year has been challenging for all of us. I think especially schools, because I think that schools basically have been, in my opinion, the only entity that's been expected to really enforce anything. And so, we've taken a lot of brunt of this and changing and inconsistencies of rules and guidelines that change. So it has been very challenging. But again, the quarantines, as we've been told, and again, Amanda can clarify that if we have a positive and we are not wearing a mask, then there could be more students or individuals that could fall under their quarantine guidelines. On the other hand, of course, the other side of that is that, how much of a risk is that? As of Monday, this could have changed, but Amanda told me we had 2 positives in the whole county. So it's pretty minimized this week. That could change day to day. We did find out today we had 1 staff member that tested positive. And then we have 2 others that are quarantined due to direct contact. So that's kind of our current situation. So that's all kind of what we discussed. So that's the input I got from the admin team, basically the principals and the other administrators that were part of that meeting, curriculum director, special ed director, district nurse, and so on. So after that, we've invited input several ways, from just general parents and public. We've asked on, we put it on the website. I sent out e-notes. The principals just informally, we talked to people, and we've gotten some input that way. The emails I've gotten back have totaled 8 emails that I printed off and went back and looked at. And that's not county board members, because I figure they'll say what they want to say tonight, but I know the feeling of some of them, and everybody's been kind of clear, I think, on some of their thoughts. And so of those 8 emails that are parents and some staff that I received, 3 were for keeping the course for the next 7 weeks and not taking a chance on bigger groups possibly being quarantined if somebody came up positive. And 5 were for applying for a variance. As far as the variance, I put some, I got the latest this morning. We had a state superintendent Zoom meeting. So of the districts of the state, there are 48 districts, 12 districts have applied for a variance from the distancing, the mask, basically all of those restrictions that are in the governor's orders. 10 have been granted a variance. 1 district is waiting to hear, but expects to be granted, and only 1 was denied. So out of those, in addition to those 12, 4 more are considering that, not counting us. So I guess 5 districts are considering applying in addition to those 12 that have applied. I'll let Nikki talk a little bit. I know I had a Zoom meeting with her on Monday, and we talked a little bit about this whole topic. And she had communicated to me that she had been in contact with Dr. Harris. We've looked at our data, and I put the latest data for Carbon County on the website. We are in the dark green, which is the least category that you can be in. So the data supports that there's not much COVID out there right now. So I guess the real question is, how much risk do we think there would be? And are we willing to accept some quarantine issues should we have a positive come up in the next 7 weeks or however many weeks again are after? So those are the main pieces of it that I'm kind of bringing back and reporting to the board. The staff, most of the principals had either meetings or email, just informal surveys of staff, and probably, well, the vast majority felt like that we should just stay the course and not take that chance. We're all coming at this from different perspectives. I can certainly understand the teacher saying, I don't want half my class or all my class quarantined and have to deal with that for 14 days when there's 7 weeks left. Parents are coming at it from that perspective. I mean, we all have our perspectives, and I certainly respect all of those. And there again, the real frustration to me about this whole year has been that schools seem to be the only entity that's expected to enforce any of the governor's orders. It's been made clear that law enforcement didn't really want to enforce anything. And even when there's been some pushback, the rules have changed. So the inconsistency in all of that is very frustrating. And believe me, we have been very frustrated all year long on that as a school district. So that's kind of the data. I would like to just take this chance to, again, reiterate this has been a very challenging year for our staff. And I know all of you realize that, and I really appreciate the support we've gotten from, in general, the parents in the community, even that don't necessarily agree with the rules, that's made our year at least where we can function and have school this whole year. And I want to especially appreciate or give props to especially our principals and nurses who have kind of been on the front lines and have taken some not so nice comments occasionally and all, but the vast majority have been cooperative, have been very respectful, and I appreciate that. But I do want to just mention our teachers, our staff, our custodians, everybody. This has been probably one of the most challenging years we can remember as school people. And just wanted to say that appreciation while we're here. And I know this has been, everybody's learning as they go, including, I guess, the health department. other people that are involved in this. You know, I'm hoping we can learn, everybody can learn from the mistakes that were made as we look back on this whole process, this whole year, and learn from them, not just schools, but I'm talking about health departments, governments, and so on. So that's kind of where I would say here, you know, the board, I'm sure, got probably more input than the 8 emails I saw, because people generally talk to board members more than they would call me. So I'm sure they'll share their input. And the reason we asked, and the board wanted to ask Amanda Brown to see if she could be here to kind of represent public health, would be to kind of clarify a variance, how it could affect the quarantine, well, yeah, I guess the risk, you know. And then the board really just would need to decide how much do they think that's a risk. One thing I would say that a couple of school districts are doing that are decided not to ask for a variance, since there's 6 to 7 to 8 weeks left that a variance could be granted in most schools, is to ask for a variance for the graduation, so they can just have normal graduations. I mean, our graduations are all in the last week. Nobody comes back after graduations as far as the students and staff. So I certainly think that's at a minimal thing would be certainly easy to do, and I certainly would support that. This other decision that the board will discuss and decide on tonight, I guess, is number one, after hearing from Amanda, at least on what the quarantines could look like, then the real decision is, so how much of a risk is that? You know, do we want to make a decision on what if could happen, or do we want to make a decision on it's very minimal, we don't, it's a risk, but we do need to realize that if we get a variance, which Amanda has said Dr. Harris would give us one in Carver County based on the data, is that a risk we want to take? I mean, there would be some risk. You know, let's say a senior got a positive that last week of school, how would that affect the graduation for that high school? I don't know. Nobody really does know. So, I mean, I'm just wanting us to go in with all of our eyes open about what we're really talking about here. And I will certainly do whatever and support whichever way the board goes. I can see all perspectives of this.
And just to clarify or help clarify a little bit, so when you keep saying risk is really risk of quarantine.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm sorry.
When we
remove,
that's right. When we remove some protections, hopefully Amanda can speak for this some, but we're at more risk of a whole class being quarantined if one person's positive. So it's not necessarily health risk, quarantine risk. And also Charlie George, board member, is on Zoom as well. Amanda, do you have anything to add to what Dr. Copeland said, or anything you want to say up front? Amanda Brown.
Hi, thanks for letting me come join your meeting today. So the requirement for isolation and quarantine does remain the same. So if a school does do a mask variance and we have a probable or a positive in the school, there is going to be a risk of more quarantines unless it's somebody that is vaccinated. So that does affect some of the teachers, but not the students. So if there is someone that comes to school within that 48 hours prior to symptom onset, or while they're infectious, we do have the potential where a lot of people could be exposed and have to do that full 14-day quarantine.
Is that a full 14 days? This is Casey Alameda. We just talked last week. Is that a full 14 days, or can they do the tests at the 5 and 7? Can you explain that?
Yes, yeah. So our basic default is the 14 days. Based on different requirements, we can shorten that up to the 10 days or the 7, depending on the case. But it's done by a case-by-case basis. But the default for anyone, it would be starting at that 14 days, and then we see if they have symptoms, if they're tested and they test negative or positive, those affect the length of the quarantine. And if they do become symptomatic during that quarantine, it does affect it as well.
Thank you.
Amanda, this is Jim. One question that came up since we talked, there's been some confusion over the 3 feet and the 6 feet. Can you explain? I know the governor's orders say 6 feet right now. Where's the 3 feet, or does that even affect us, the 3 feet?
So there was a recent change by the CDC that they released that, based on some new studies, that they recommend a minimum of 3 feet social distancing in classrooms. And that, of course, the study was done with masks. So without the mask, we still do recommend that 6 feet distancing. And that change kind of came out after the last update of the orders. So the orders do still state 6 feet. That is the most safe way, especially with no mask, is the 6 feet. But it just changed a little bit because the masks do decrease the transmission, and different types of environments also affect the transmission. So it is something the CDC was studying, but our orders still say the 6 feet.
Amanda, if I choose to have my child wear a mask in the class and there's a variance, would my child be quarantined if they had exposure in that class?
So that's a little tricky. So the important thing that we look at is the person who is sick or contagious has to be wearing a mask, and the person they're exposing has to wear a mask. If both people are wearing a mask, then they would not have to quarantine. But if the person that is exposing the class or the group of people is not wearing a mask, it doesn't matter if you're wearing a mask or not, you would still have to quarantine.
Okay, thank you. Nikki, do you have anything to add? All right, I guess at this point, we'll open it up to public comment. Please raise your hand and just step up, introduce yourself, and say what you have to say. Anybody would like to. Go ahead. You can both come up and both get a chance. Yeah, just right there. So, yeah, good enough.
All right. My name's Haley. I'm a senior class officer at Saratoga Middle High School, and I'm here to discuss prom.
And I'm Nicole Bauer. I am part of the prom planning committee of the junior class for 2021.
So we would like to discuss the regulations that are in place about prom and see if there was something we could do to change it or allow out of town dates. And we have a full plan put in place for you guys.
Some of the things we thought of doing were adding little hand sanitizer things into our goodie bags, which we try to have one for each individual person that's going to show up. We plan to have 70 at most. You know, that's what we're planning to do. And then we are also planning to take temperatures at the table out there when we're going to have the pay table. And then what else are we going to do?
We also plan on wearing masks as well at the dance if we are allowed. Since we will have goodie bags, there will be no touching of several things with several people. So everybody will just have their own individual goodie bag. And with the masks, since we won't be social distancing, we'll still be able to have protection, I guess. And we know that you guys have allowed Encampment and Hannah to come, but Encampment has been allowed to go to Bags prom and Rollins prom, and some Encampment students are going to Farson prom. So multiple conference proms are happening and students are coming from everywhere. So we would just like, you know, at least a chance to have that as well.
And another thing to add to that is we can bring people over from Hannah over, but some of our homeschooled kids that their parents chose to homeschool them this year because of the COVID restrictions can't end up going because they're not in our district, technically.
Any questions,
Yeah.
comments?
And if any of you have any thoughts about other restrictions, if we get to allow this, we are open for anything, for sure.
We would just like to be able to bring out of town dates, much like our other schools around us.
We just want our, especially our seniors, to have the best prom that they could.
I mean, seniors, this is a really hard year for seniors. I know last year's seniors, they got a normal year at the beginning. I know at the end they had to be quarantined, but this year's seniors, we've had to go through masks. We couldn't go to prom, or we couldn't have a homecoming dance. We had to wear masks at football games. We had to wear masks at basketball games. It would just be nice to have one normal-ish thing for us seniors. So, yeah, thank you for your time. Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you, girls, for coming. That's probably, really an administrative issue to make that call, but we appreciate you bringing it to us and having your comments. Thank you. Yeah.
My name is Christy Murphy. My daughter's in school at Central Elementary. So the first thing, I guess, is what are the kids doing on the weekends? They're playing with a friend, right? So the mask thing, I think the hardest thing as a parent is that it's out of my hands. So I don't have the choice. If I want her to go to school and be with her friends, well, we gotta follow the rules. I don't agree with the rules. She sees me not wearing a mask. We are all not wearing masks right now. I get we're distanced, but they're also distanced in their classroom. So I think as a parent, the biggest thing I'm asking for is give the parents the option. Let the parents decide if they want to send their kid with a mask. I get there are parents who want their kid to wear a mask. I understand that. I don't rely on the school board to take care of my child's personal health. As a parent, that's my responsibility. That's my job. And I do take that serious. I get that not all parents are created equal, but I also understand that I respect other parents' choices of what they want to do with their kids, and I would ask that the same is applied to me. That's all I'm asking. I'm glad that you guys are having this discussion. I hope that you do apply for the variance. I think it's worth it, because what are you gonna do when the state says, well, it's flu season and now you gotta do this? I just feel like it's a very fine line, and I understand that there's prom and graduation and other things that affect the older kids that aren't going to affect the little kids. But I think that it's worth it to apply for the variance. I really do. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Stratton Swanson. I have 2 little boys that go to Encampment Elementary. The question is if this variance goes, is this variance just for the remainder of this semester?
Yes, for the rest, it'd be for the rest of the school year.
Okay. Second thought is, if we do approve the variance, I think it'd be a good idea and a good time to do it now. Because yes, I know if it crashed in our face, we'd have a lot of issues and stuff like that to get through the rest of the school year. But if it went well, it might be some good data and a good test run for maybe a fall variance, if that's even been brought up yet.
One thing I'll say about it, a little bit about that, this Smart Start plan is required for all school districts to come up with, along with the guidelines they were requiring, is for 1 school year. It expires at the end of the school year.
Okay.
Now, I guess they could require us another thing next year, but I mean, it's so far, it's only through this school year.
Okay.
These whole regulations so far.
Right. I mean, just.
Exactly. I understand what you're saying. I just wanted to kind of clarify it.
Okay.
Right now, it doesn't go into next school year at all.
Oh, okay. All right.
But we didn't know it was going to go into last one either. So it did. So, I mean, I'm just.
But I mean, if we did have it, then they wanted to do something, then we would have a good argument.
Exactly.
Hey, this worked for us. So
I just wanted to make sure everybody knew what from now on.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I'm Rachel Swanson. One thing I'd like everybody to kind of think about is with the warmer weather coming up. There's not air conditioning in our building, and I know that one of my kiddos has already come after PE very, very hot. His mask had been on and he was hyperventilating. So I think that that's something else to consider with the warmer weather coming. So, thank you.
My name is Kirby Berger. I have 3 kids here at Saratoga. And I wanted to start off by saying just how thankful I am for the teachers, for the staff, the nurses, the administration. We were out of town this last year, met a gal, her little brother, that hadn't been in school for almost a year. This was in February. He hadn't been in school since the previous March, not a day. And so I really appreciate the effort that everybody's done, getting in there and just what you guys do. And Jim and Melissa, and I know it's been a hard year. I'm just really thankful for the people that we have in this valley. To keep this going for our kids, the teachers, and everybody. I do believe it's time to apply for a variance. I came here kind of prepared to talk about why we don't really need the mask anymore because of the vaccine. And we're talking about risk of health, and we're not even talking about risk of health. We're talking about risk of quarantine, which to me, we're talking about, you say this 100-year pandemic, and we're not even relating it to health right now because it's not even that. And I just, I agree with Trent. I think we need to set a standard, a little bit of a pushback that we don't want this to continue on through next year. Like, I know you said, Jim, at the end this year, but I do want to set the tone for what the parents want going into next year, because who knows what they're going to come up with. If nobody has any pushback, it's pretty easy to, well, let's just carry it on through the next year. And so I do think it's time to apply for the variance, and I appreciate this opportunity to talk about it. As this came up, last fall or whenever it was, it just seemed like we were just shoved down our throats and we had no input. So I appreciate that.
Any other comment?
Thank you guys for letting us speak, and I want to thank everybody for working so hard this year. I know it's been a rough year. But I don't know if anybody's brought up that MHCC for the last 2 or 3 weeks has said anybody 18 and older can get the vaccination. So I know at the beginning of the year, it was all about protecting people, but we're a year and a half into this, and there's not really a large percentage of people to protect anymore. 10% of the Carbon County population has already tested for COVID. That means they have immunity, supposedly. I don't know what the percentage of vaccinated is, but again, to me, it's not a health risk. So I fully support a variance, and I agree with Kirby. I think this sets a really bad standard for August if we continue to tell our kids to mask up and to do social distancing, but we don't do that anywhere else. So I feel like we should probably let our kids have a sense of normalcy, even if it's only for 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks. My little boy, he's in kindergarten and this is his first year. I did get a health exemption for him, but having to explain to him why he can't sit with his friends during lunch sucks. And having to explain to him why he can't visit with his big buddy really sucks. And his big buddy graduates this year. I think that's my favorite thing about encampment is that all those kids can see each other and learn from each other. And I just think we should give our kids a chance to try to do that before the year is out. And again, I appreciate everything everybody has done. Thank you.
And just to add that the vaccine, I don't know if you're aware, but Carbon County School District 2 made it available for all of our staff, so they've all had opportunity.
James, if I can add something. Amanda, what did you say that the vaccine percentage was in our district with the staff?
I don't know what the percentages of staff was that was vaccinated. I think I'd have to ask Nikki for that.
Nikki, do you have that answer?
Between 50 and 60.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Don't let me have scared you up too much at the beginning about not repeating. So if you want to speak up, feel like there's not that many people here.
Hi, my name is Karen with Nancy, and my children attend encampment, but I don't believe that we should regulate for our children to be wearing these masks. It's not doing anything. All it's doing is potentially preventing flu. That is all. The regulations for flu and everything has gone down in flu. Otherwise, COVID is basically like the flu, and none of you probably believe me in this, but preventing our children from getting more oxygen from what they're currently doing isn't okay. And I don't approve of it, and I don't feel like they need to utilize it. If you're doing your social distancing, they don't need the masks. What is the point of masks if they are doing their social distancing? So why continue it? Just get rid of it. Sorry, apologize, thank you.
Anybody else? And don't feel hesitant if you have a contrary opinion to be willing to. We'll do whatever. Anybody, I guess I'll open it up to the board. Anybody, thoughts, comments? So where we stand right now, okay, if no action is taken, no motions are made, the SMART plan is enforced until the end of the year. Nothing has to be done for that to happen. It's in force right now. And it's set to expire as Jim mentioned, if we choose to apply for variance, there are probably two different options. One would be strictly for graduations. So that, I mean, we're basically in the school year, parents, people that come, it just is what it is. There's no quarantine really. After that, people aren't coming back to school, just like everywhere else in town. People are just there. Or an option to apply for a variance that one option is do nothing, or consider one of those two variance options.
Yes, I think board members have something to say, probably, maybe in response to any of the comments we've had, Dr. Copeland's comments, Amanda's. Be a good time for it.
I got some.
There you go.
Real quick. Kirby, you brought up great points, stuff that I've never even thought of before. And girls, God, I feel sorry for you. We're talking seniors in high school, and we're talking proms. And I can remember back in the black and white days when I graduated, and that was big stuff. But we're also torn by the fact that the staff and the A team is somebody that we support and that we want to show support for, want to continue forward with the mask mandate, knowing now that the Smart Start plan will expire at the end of the school year. The safe bet is to do that and to carry on kind of like we are, but I hate the damn things. I absolutely feel for everybody in here that has kids. My kid came up and graduated through this school, and it's terrible that you're not going to be able to do a lot of the things that took place back then. So just, I hope you guys realize that however this board votes, I hate these things, and I'm with you 100%. If we could do away with it, and I would, but just know that, we all support you guys, and our hearts all go out for you, because this is rough, and it's a tough decision for us to make either way. So please keep that in mind.
So I'm going to speak a little bit to every group in here. I had a pretty good meeting with Amanda last week and learned some really important things that I think a lot of people haven't been looking at. And maybe if you did get the emails from the school and looked at where Carbon County sits right now with COVID transmission. We were in light green 3 weeks ago. We are now in dark green, which means we have, and Amanda would have tell me the exact numbers, or maybe Dr. Phillips can read it off of that thing, I don't have it right in front of me, that says we are at a very low transmission rate right now. We have a lot of people vaccinated. I know, where I'm employed, there's probably 50% people vaccinated that are not in the high risk category. It's everyone. So the vaccine to me, and I'm in ag vaccines, you know, you've been vaccinated, then you depend on that to work. I mean, that's my life. That's how I've always felt about vaccines. I'm kind of with Kirby and I'm with Trenton, and that I think we do need a trial run, and I think there is an end point on this. And that's more of my stance on this than it is kind of get rid of the masks. I think there's an end point. And I think the best thing to do is to have a trial run. And where if we hit this fall, we might know, you know, if they do say we have to come up with variants again, we can say, hey, we tried this out. And the bad thing is about fall, and we all know it, my kids hit county fair, and they come out of there, they're so sick because you just get a bunch of kids together and kids are gonna get sick. So this fall's gonna be tough, and if we have to do variants at that point, our hands are gonna be tied, we're gonna have to stay with kids. Now with the staff, and I'm talking to the admin now, I understand that you guys are scared. I understand that we want a graduation for our kids. But I also think that there's a time that we can try this out. I talked for an extensive amount of time today to the Niobrara board chairman. And she told me that they've had it for 3 weeks. They've had no issues. They came back from spring break and went into this mask ordinance. They've had it since March 22nd, and they've had no issues. Orslowski is low. They've been in green pretty much this whole time. But we are now too. So I think, you know, to be scared of a quarantine is not a good plan. Be scared of health, yes, but to be scared of a quarantine, I don't think that's a good idea when we're looking at a school situation. And especially for the board members who are hearing from parents and not just staff. And we absolutely, I mean, I love this district. A lot of people know that. We've been to school all year. I have friends in Colorado whose kids go Monday and Thursday, and that's it. So I know what we've gotten through. I appreciate it more than you know, but at this point, I think we need to apply for this variance. And I've been pretty vocal about that. Everybody, I'm pretty sure has heard me on the radio. I call this the Can-Do Valley. And I know that Hannah, Stephen, we're going to group you right in there, and Laura, but we kind of take care of ourselves here, and we've always done that, and I feel like we can do that moving forward. You know, I don't think that we should be in fear of what might happen in the next 8 weeks, but we should be, you know, encouraged that we might actually see some progress for our place, our district in this situation. So I guess that's my, I guess 3 things that Amanda told me that are really important that were in that group. She said that Dr. Couch, who is our health officer for this county, was comfortable for us applying for this variance. That's pretty big to me. To have a county health officer think that we are okay to do that. And then finally, she told me we have to have board action tonight that agrees to it, which we know that, so that I'm just adding to her list of things she told me. But you know, that's some of the things I want to put out there. I listen to the people stand up here and counted 6 people in favor and none not. So if you're not in favor, I'd like to know right now. And I'm not going to single you out. Raise your hand really low. I'll add you to my count here.
Casey, I'd like to speak.
Okay.
I'm Laura Nyson. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the principal of the Northern Elementary School. So I have 3 elementary schools. I have 3 quarantine staff as of Monday morning. Like all of you guys, I thought that we'd have a week or 2 after spring break before we have to worry about quarantines, but nope. Hit first thing Monday morning. I have 3 staff out. I have 1 available sub. Okay. It's okay. We're used to flexing and moving around. but my staff move around too. One of my staff members goes to 2 of my schools. Had we already done a variance, had that staff member been in both of those schools before they found out that they were exposed, I have 2 schools completely shut down right now. That's a huge concern for me. We are going into the white top window, which we didn't get to do last year, starting next week. I have a teacher, a classroom teacher, that I can't get back in the classroom until the 21st of April. His kids are coming off of spring break, no classroom teacher, working with subs. I worked on my newsletter today for my parents. All of the excitement about getting to do our spring concerts, our wax museum, big thing up in our 4th grade classroom. And I'm thinking, if we do the variance and we have a quarantine, all of those things that we were just now getting to do again are going to end up getting shut down. And I know we're 3 little tiny schools and we don't affect everybody. But, and yes, you're right, it's a fear of a quarantine, not a fear of health. It's the world we live in. But when I think about, if I shut down my 2 little schools because somebody comes and they're exposed, now we're back to doing virtual, right where we were a year ago. And I don't think there's a single person in this room that wants to go back there. So I'm with the rest of you guys. I hate wearing masks, and I guarantee you, when I'm not at school, my mask is not on. I have elementary kids, and you know what my kids have rocked with. They have not fought it. We do the social distancing, but one of the questions that was asked was, well, as long as we social distance, we don't have to wear masks. But you know what I've been able to see in my classrooms? I've been able to see my teachers utilize the mask and still be able to do group projects with their kids. Because the kids put on their masks and they go together and they work together. So some of those things that we were missing, like the little things that happened today, with the masks on, they can do that. They can teach the classes the way they want to. On the Fridays, when we have the extra Friday once a month, we've still been able to do STEAM activities because they follow those mask rules and they work together. And my kindergartners work with my 6th graders because they wear the mask. Do I love it? No. And every day I pray that it goes away. But we're looking at 7.5 weeks. Even if we get the variance, we might get 5.5 weeks by the time it comes through. But do we really want to risk being able to shut down the things that we just got? We might not even have a problem if we get too many people quarantined, right? Do we want to risk that again?
Yes, we do, because you're suggesting that masks are the only reason why everyone is safe. And that is not true. Because like you just said, everyone gets to go in and do their little sports and everything else and congregate with each other. There is no difference. So why put masks on our children's face and suffocate them more so than what they already are, with their only 21 allotted % oxygen that we have in our atmosphere? It makes no sense. The only thing that it has done is prevented the flu and prevented other things like germ spreading and whatever else, but it is not necessary. None of these masks are necessary. And this COVID is big government conspiracy to freak all of you out. And that's what it's doing. I know.
No, you're right.
I get it.
You're right. And the thing is that you're right. This isn't about the health. And we've said that all the time. It's about the quarantine. It's about how normal can we make our school year. Yes, the masks are uncomfortable. They're not normal. But our kids, and we've heard it from multiple people, have had a more normal school year this year than some other parts of the country, in that they at least got to come to school and have it. And I'm not going to debate. I just wanted to share an alternative point.
Thank you. One thing I'll point out. No, it's fine. And one of the frustrations, as you can see, and we have, is that Carbon County School District 2 is not in charge of quarantine decisions. That comes from county health and the state health. It is not for us, and we've had some issues where we've worked with them to try to get some kids off quarantine. We're not the ones quarantined. Carbon 2 is not issuing quarantines. That comes from the county health and state health, and we really don't have a lot of flexibility. People test positive, we're going to get kids quarantined. Not because we believe it's right or we think there's health issues necessarily, that it's not somebody else making that decision. Yeah.
I just had a question. What is the penalty for not following the Smart Start plan? I'm not aware of it. If there are any, I don't know. I understand what the Wyoming state statute is for violating the health officer's orders. The health officer is, or the doctor, whatever you want to call it, is okay with us applying for the variance. Is there any kind of penalty that the Department of Education is holding over their heads? Because I feel like you guys are on the board for our school district. Our school district is very different than other school districts. I understand that. So I'm just curious, is there any penalty that we're looking at?
To apply for one?
If we don't follow,
If we don't
the
follow.
Smart Start, I'm not aware of what that is.
So one of the issues is that we put our employees at odds with what they're asked to do from the state of Wyoming. So do they, the teachers and the administrators, do they follow what we as a board tell them to do? Or what the state of Wyoming is told to do? And so they, you know, if they say, if we're on a Smart Start plan, they're tasked to enforce that. And then a staff member got COVID and then got sick and then died, is sick. So they might personally be liable if they weren't following the plan that we agreed to. So they have to follow the rules. And that's why the discussion about the variance is that's still following the rules.
Sure.
We've applied, whether we agree with those rules or not, part of it becomes personal liability for staff members. So if we don't follow, so like the sublet county thing where they just say they're not going to follow it,
right?
You put your staff at risk of not following state mandates, whether you agree with it or not.
Right.
We would be putting our staff in a situation that they would face some personal liability.
Well, and also I would just add to that, that's all correct. Who knows what WDE would enforce or not, I'll be honest.
Right.
I don't know what they would do. They could withhold funding every day without, we weren't following their approved plan or our approved plan.
Sure.
It could also affect our accreditation. Would it? I don't know. I talked to the superintendent in Pinedale this morning just to ask if they've heard anything. He said they haven't heard one thing from WDE or anyone. So I mean, it's unknown. I mean, I guess they could do some things, would they? They haven't so far contacted Pinedale at all, which is interesting.
Yeah.
What would be the for that?
I would just say if we apply for a variance for graduation, there would be all of those requirements would go away. There wouldn't be 6 foot of social distancing, there wouldn't have to be masks. It would basically be a completely normal graduation, pre-COVID era.
Coming on to that, as a student, you know, I don't like wearing masks either. I don't agree with it, but just to have something normal for once would be nice, even if we have to suffer for a couple more weeks, just to be able to have a normal experience of graduation. A huge deal for I would prefer doing that rather than risking not being able to have anything instead of applying for the rest of the school year variance and then we all have to quarantine all the seniors and then we don't get a normal graduation at all. And then seniors are quarantined, everybody in high school would end up in quarantine. I feel like the graduation needs to work. My personal preference. So I just kind of want to add to that.
Nice one.
Okay, well, anyway, so talked about how she can see what happens like outside of the student perspective, but as a student,
just wanted to say that the people I'm around in school, I end up being around after school without a mask. And so most of the time, everybody, especially in a small town like Saratoga, there's not a lot to do, you know? And so, especially like, yeah, in our high school, we're around each other a lot outside of it. And so I just don't think it would really change that much. If we took off our mask, like it would maybe a little bit because not all of us are always around each other, but we're around each other.
Thanks for that comment. My 3 children are all over in the gym at a basketball. None of them have masks on. Nobody else up there has a mask on. I'm not going to get quarantined from school.
Yeah, just that's something I wanted to add. I thought it was, my mind's kind of been spinning since I got here because we're still not even talking about health issues. And the stuff that comes from I'm talking to her about it. I corresponded with Dr. Couch. It's the health officers, and we're narrowing on this tiny little part of health, which is disease prevention. But we're not talking about community as far as diet, exercise, and the oxygen, these other components of health. And then we come here, we're still not even talking about that. And we're talking about compliance. How are we compliant? It has nothing to do with how it's affected the health of our children or staff, anything. And so, to me, the bigger issue is it's not about so much about masks, it's about the quarantine that they're hanging over our heads to keep us compliant with this. And so I have a question is, what are the chances of applying for a variance from the quarantine order 12 as from the mask and social distance?
Probably best to ask that to Amanda.
I was gonna say that would be an Amanda question, probably.
I just want to say that the risk of quarantine is, in my opinion, oversimplifying this. The only reason why we do quarantine people is to protect the public's health. That is our main goal through this whole thing. So it is not an option to opt out of isolation or quarantine.
Speak to that mic in the middle there.
Amanda, this is Kirby again. I was wondering where the orders for the quarantine come from.
Those come from the CDC, and then it comes down from the state health officer. So ultimately that is out of our hands, and it is directly from the CDC. But the state health officer has made it very clear that it will not be an option to opt out of that. There are a lot of options to do variances around events or the masks in schools, the social distancing, all those other factors, but we cannot opt out of the quarantine. The main purpose of why we are quarantining when people are exposed is to prevent them from spreading the illness further. So if we're quarantining students, we're preventing them from potentially giving it to family members, to friends, to other people in the public by them being at home and quarantining. If they do become ill, they're not going to further spread the illness. And not everybody is vaccinated in our high-risk groups in our county. So we are still protecting those high-risk groups by doing quarantines. So yes, we're super lucky right now that our numbers are looking so great. But all it would take would be one positive coming into a classroom, and we would have to quarantine that whole classroom, not just for the sake of quarantining, is because if we didn't quarantine that classroom, every one of those persons can further spread it. One person could potentially expose and infect 50 people or more. So it's not just about quarantining, it's about the further spread of COVID.
Why are you not quarantining everybody else then in the state, only schools?
We quarantine everybody that's defined as a close contact to a positive in or out of school. So when we get a positive, we do a case investigation, and we quarantine anyone that meets that requirement, whether it's family, people in the home, a friend, anybody that was within 6 feet longer than 15 minutes without a mask.
So would that pertain to a classroom if they're not, I mean, a whole classroom, saying you would quarantine a whole classroom because of one kid? What if they're social distance? What if they have that spacing? There's a lot of what ifs to just say you're going to quarantine a whole class.
Absolutely. That was probably maybe a poor way of wording it. There's potential depending on the interactions of those children, whether they're social distanced or not. And so there's a lot of factors that go into our investigations. So if everyone is 100% of the time 6 feet apart, then we wouldn't have to quarantine. But if they are within those 6 feet within for 15 minutes or more, which we know people come in and out of that within a 24-hour period very easily. So it's not as black and white of, hey, we get a positive, we quarantine the whole class. We would do an investigation and we determine there may be only, the 3 students that sit next to them or something like that. We would have to do that full investigation to determine that. But the potential is there where we could be exposing more students than with the masks.
Amanda, I had 2 kids in basketball quarantine, middle school and high school. This is Casey again. Our family was not quarantined, just our kid. I mean, if you're gonna quarantine everybody that's exposed to these people, I mean, it didn't happen. So, and I mean, my kids weren't positive, but it didn't happen. So, I mean, how are these quarantines, they're just selectively being chosen? I know that you helped us a bunch, getting a bunch of middle school girls back into school when we had a quarantine on the basketball team, and we were able to get these books of what kid played what kid. So I appreciate that, and I hope that if this board chooses to do this variance, you would look into it with that kind of detail.
Absolutely. So we only quarantine one level from a positive. So that would be why your children were quarantined, but not the whole household. So if somebody is positive and exposes other people, then we quarantine those people that were exposed. And then we always monitor those ones. If they develop symptoms, end up testing positive, then we go one level from that and quarantine the home of that individual. So we are only, the requirements that we have to do for quarantine are very strict, and we don't make these up. We have to follow the rules the way they're presented to us. We always go one level from that positive. And absolutely, if we end up doing investigations, I mean, we would do the full investigation. We determine only to quarantine those students that truly need to. We wouldn't just be blanketly passing out quarantines if it wasn't needed.
Well, I have a question, Amanda. My husband was tested positive for COVID, but my children were not in contact with him 5 days prior, and then had an entire week without being exposed to him, and they still were quarantined.
So I can't answer every question on every quarantine because there's a lot of people that interpret the rules. There may have been a reason for that. I can't comment on that. I know that there are reasons that are parameters that we follow. So without knowing the full case, I wouldn't be able to really comment on why they were or weren't.
Something I've kind of been curious about is when the false positives, after a positive test and then they get a false positive, have those numbers been pulled back out?
Yes, so there are different testing platforms, and it does happen where, say we get a positive rapid, which isn't as accurate of a test, and then a negative PCR, which is the most accurate test we have. Those numbers will be pulled from our laboratory confirms, and then we would, depending on if they had a positive antigen and they have more than 2 symptoms, they would be considered a probable case. If not, it's taken out and we monitor them, but they're not counted on our data for Carbon County.
Thank you. All right, thanks. Anybody else from the board have anything that might speak up?
I just want to say, obviously this is a really tough decision for us to make because we have to look at both sides. We have to look at these kids trying to graduate and they want it as normal as possible. We have to look at these little kids that have to wear the mask every day. And I don't agree with them. I don't know that they really make that much of a difference. So what I want to say is, if we decide to apply for the variance, we are going to rely on you as well, and our admin team is going to rely on you to keep your kids home when they're sick.
I think that's a great point.
Yes.
I mean, that's what, as far as I'm concerned, everyone's personal health is their own responsibility, and you guys need to remember that. I mean, I know, like, we don't want our kids to miss school. We don't want to, miss what's going on. We don't want to do this, but if you're sick, you need to stay home.
Real quick, Dr. Copeland, talking about the graduation variance. Theoretically, we do not come back to school after graduation. So when those kids walk out of that school right before graduation, all bets are off. Can we not have them on graduation at that point? Because theoretically, school is over. So applying for a graduation variance to me would be like a waste of time, wouldn't it? Because it's already going to take place.
I guess it just depends on if you consider graduation ceremony part of the school year or not. I can't answer that to that technical.
Paul, I get your point, but part of it is that we're still following protocols. We don't have to have any protocols. In school buildings, you don't have masks, social distancing, none of that stuff. You can come and do what you want, hug and high five, shave, stuff like that.
Can we do both?
Both.
Both variances.
Well, if we did the first variance and it was granted, it would cover right.
But it doesn't really, because all the first variance does is the masks, correct?
Well, if you look at I put an example of the template that Dr. Harris, the state health officer, gave all superintendents. That if you apply for a variance, you use this as a model for the letter. This is the letter that was approved for these other 8 or 10 that already have a variance. And so I put our data in there and I put the example, but you notice in that first paragraph, it says, Carbon County School District number 2 requests to be exempt from the following provisions of the statewide public health order number 1. And that's paragraph 5 provisions A through G. And what those are, A is 6 feet of distancing. We could leave that in or take it out of our variance. We could leave that in and still want to do the 6 feet distancing, but other schools have taken that out also. Item B is space coverings. Item D is has to do with buses, keeping 6 feet apart, and when you can't, wear a mask on the bus. Item E is indoor events intended by non-students must comply with the following provisions, and all. It gets rid of all of those. And then F is hand hygiene. G is individuals with symptoms. So it just basically gets rid of all, and that's where all those restrictions are in the governor's orders. So that's what we would be asking variance for, is to get rid of those, or whichever ones we would want to. I guess you wouldn't have to, get rid of all of them. But that's what all the other districts have been doing. They've just been using that model letter.
So I think as a point of order or protocol, go forward, the conclusion where we're at here, not to stop discussing right now, but just to say, so if somebody wants to make a motion on the whole variance, that would be first, probably. If somebody makes that motion, we could discuss if we need to vote. If that passes, it passes, then it's done. If it fails, then there could be another motion made for the graduation. I'm not saying the first one will get made. I'm just saying that would be what I would see as the procedure also.
So Amanda, I have a question. This is Georgia. Say we get rid of the masks, but keep the 6 feet social distancing. Because from what you just said, that kind of sounded like maybe that would limit some of the quarantines more than if we just got rid of the whole, if we just applied for a variance for the whole entire thing.
Yes, so if you did keep the social distancing in there, that would drastically decrease the amount of quarantines as long as the social distancing was followed And we would look at that, and that would help for the instances that social distancing is appropriate and could be maintained.
One concern I have with that is like, that, you know, as people were mentioning, doing the group projects and stuff, getting kind of limits our ability. If we just have that exemption.
Okay. I mean, Grant, this is a very controversial subject. And I am very happy that we live in a country where there's freedom of discussions. I believe our main goal should be to maximize the number of days that students and teachers can have contact. And for example, there are teachers in our district that have young children in school, and those young children cannot take care of themselves. So if that young child was put in quarantine, the parent would have to stay home to take care of the child. So then we would be looking for subs. And, you know, much as the subs try to do a good job, they still can't replace the teacher. So we need to keep in mind that this is a very short period of time to the end of the year. After this, then we can look and see how things go over the summer. If the state is going to demand something, then we can work on that. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's just finish the year with the maximum number of student-teacher days. That's what.
Can I ask the admin, like, how many of your class, like, when the kids are in class, are they social distance? I mean, obviously in the hallways, that wouldn't work if they didn't have a mask on, because they probably won't stay 6 feet apart. But in the classrooms, are they pretty much social distance? I'm just curious.
It depends on the time of the activity that the students are doing. You know, for doing group activities that they're not social distancing.
Right.
My 5th and 6th grader have such large classes, they can't social distance. They don't wear masks all the time. They don't have their seats until the time. When they're out of their seat, they get their masks on. But when they're out of their seats,
right,
they wear masks. So we can get 3 feet, we can't get 6 feet.
Well, that's the point. What is the point of masks if we can't keep our social distance and still keep masks on? We don't want kids to have masks on all the time. I genuinely do not think that this is preventing anything. I think that all it is doing is depleting oxygen from our children, and that is it. And pissing them off and the teachers when they don't wear them properly. And that's it. That's all they're doing. These masks are not doing anything to prevent anything. I give my kids face masks that are like this, the little open whatever things. That's not preventing anything. It doesn't prevent anything. I want all of you to understand and see that this isn't doing anything but creating another distraction for our kids learning and the teachers having to teach the kids because they're trying to get them to fixate on their masks. It's not beneficial and it's correct, in my opinion.
So in our building, we do have the 6 feet, because we have the space to do it. Our teachers and our students have the routine of they put on a mask anytime they walk out of the room, so that takes care of the hallway issue. They take them off for PE. There's a place for them to hang them in the gym for PE. There's a place to hang them by the doors to go outside for recess. But when they're in the hallways, they have them on. And like I said earlier, when they do group work, they throw their mask on, go over and work with somebody else when they're back to their seat.
Ours are spaced out in all classrooms. They
get closer than 6 feet, they can put their mask on, or when they're in the hallways, they put their mask.
Right.
And we do the best we can to hallways. I feel like the mask police, but you know, but that's one area you constantly see them crossing and all that. Classrooms, sitting at their desk.
So when they're playing tag football in PE, and they're close to each other, less than 6 feet distance, how is that any different than when they're in the hallway? 6 feet distance with an mask on. There's no difference. Or when they're sitting at a lunch table that is not 6 feet apart.
Ms. Woodmansee, I think we generally, most of us would agree that masks are nuisance.
They are a nuisance.
And
They're not
I think we
necessary.
agree that they're not really about a lot of health. It's not, this is really a question about health, which is part of your frustrations and part of the things that you're about. We're not the ones that decide whether the quarantine happens or not. Which I'm sorry, I'm not
You
arguing.
can decide. Governor Gordon said that masks are no longer regulated. So as a county, you can't decide no longer regulate masks.
Yes.
Right. Is what
We've
I'm saying.
heard your
That's
opinion.
fine.
I appreciate it. You've got it.
James,
I do appreciate you sharing it, but I think.
can I go?
Yep.
Okay. I would like to commend the high school students for coming. I think it's amazing that you thought outside of the box, come up with your own plan how to make that work out. And I hope that the administration looks at that, even if it's by student situation, and possibly, since those kids put in the hard effort of thinking through ways to accommodate out of town dates. I think that is amazing that you guys put in that effort and that thought process. So thank you. I think a huge thing, like Georgia said, all the parents don't want masks. It's gonna ride strongly on you keeping your kids home if they're sick. That's going to be the most important part of this. We have amazing administration and staff and nurses that I know, if we have quarantines, that will work very hard with Amanda to make them as minimal as possible. I think this variance is a way, like Kirby said, you have to start out somewhere. And I think we have the capability to apply for a variance, to get a variance, and for it to go very well with everybody's support. And there's tons of parent support. There's tons of community support. I know it is gonna be, I know there's fear of what can happen at school. And I know you don't wanna have to find subs and wanna have to deal with that. And I know the change doesn't seem that big of a deal for such a short time, but for parents and stuff, this needs to become a health situation about our children's health, and what is best for our children's health is my decision for my children and your decision for your children. It's nobody else's decision. And if I want my child to continue to wear a mask, they'll continue to wear a mask in class. If I don't, they won't if we have this variance. It's your decision what you want to do with your child, and I think this variance will give parents that pulling back, that they have some control of what goes on for their children. Thank you.
Charlie, you've kind of been quiet. Do you have anything more to add? Don't want to act like we're ignoring you. I'm not always real good about including people that call in. Can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Charlie.
Unplug your headphones.
Charlie, unplug your headphones. Really talking. Wow. Well, unplug it from your computer. If you can.
You need to go down and change the microphone where the microphone is under this mute button.
Take your mic off of mute, Charlie.
It's off of mute. You need to go in and change what microphone it is.
I'll win that one. While we're waiting for Charlie, I think, Karen or Casey or somebody wants to make that a motion.
I can call
for
Karen.
the various- Okay. So we're not, I mean, I think we've heard.
That's fine. I really don't know how to work. Mr. Chairman, I make the motion that we request, to be exempt from the public state health order number 1, but I would request that we just ask for the masks, the face coverings, thus minimizing our quarantine, especially within the classroom. So I'm gonna put that little tidbit on my motion and see where it goes.
Except for graduation.
I'm not adding graduation because I want the full variance. And like he said, it sets it in. I don't know. I mean, he told me the graduation is separate. Oh, gotcha. Never mind. Except for graduation. I don't know how that works, you.
Yeah, I'm making notes right now.
I'm writing that one.
It's been moved and seconded to apply for variance that is only regarding to the mask, so it doesn't affect. I guess I struggle with it. I get what this mask are, but we still have 6 foot social distancing, which
Get out of that.
you can't really do in the hall. Then we have the buses.
When possible.
That.
Okay, well,
Any discussion? All right, that's all.
We did, and it didn't do anything.
So, Jim, read the things again. Good.
Sure.
Audio settings, here, let me shut this off.
The health order stated item or paragraph 5 provisions A through G. So item A, the 6 feet of separation between individuals should be maintained as much as possible unless otherwise directed by public health officials. So what I'm reading is you leave that in there. So it's much, we're not asking for a variance of that.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
So as much as possible, 6 feet distance.
Yes.
So
So just to clarify, the 6 feet, if we're under 15 minutes, passing in the hall.
I don't see a test.
Yes.
It says
item B is the face coverings thing, so I won't read all that. That's all the face coverings.
automatically adjust microphone
Item
volume.
D
or
is 6 foot
automatically
spacing of
join audio by
students during
computer to
transportation to and from the facility shall be maintained as much as practical unless otherwise directed by public health officials.
I don't
Face
see
coverings
it.
shall be worn during transportation when 6 feet of separation cannot be maintained. I guess that would be just eliminating that second sentence.
Yeah.
Item E, indoor events attended by non-students must
Yeah,
comply with
that's
the following provisions, so we want to get rid of that, because that space
No.
coverage for everybody.
It's on the audio tab,
F is hand hygiene must be performed frequently.
and then it says,
We encourage that anyway.
it says it doesn't say anything about test.
And then G, individual with symptoms or exposure to an individual within the last 14 days may not attend the institution unless otherwise directed by public health officials, so.
Okay, I'm gonna rejoin and see if
Leave
it's.
that one on there.
I don't think it is.
Yeah.
That's what you're
That's
at.
the sick person stays home. Just
The
follow that.
only thing, what you're doing is the mask.
So the reason I'm doing that is it may not go, I don't know. But my whole thought in this is to minimize this whole quarantine thing.
I can't hear them.
Because they're saying when possible, as much as practical. You know, our kids are passing in the hall, they have like 3 minutes. And I know because my kids are tardy. So I can't those kids. So, I mean, they're not in the 15-minute range of this passing in the hall. The only obstacle we might have here, and we're gonna hope we don't, because this is why we're doing this, is the buses. And we don't have, I mean, we've got some buses that are full of kids, but we don't have the issues other districts would have. So these kids can space out.
They wear masks for the buses now.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Well, I'm pretty sure they don't.
I'm pretty sure they don't.
There's no reason to have a rule if you don't want.
Yeah. So
They get out of town.
that's my motion and that's my reasoning. I don't know.
Okay, all right. I think everybody understands that.
And actually, I just heard from an audience member who's being quiet that Upton left the masks on the buses.
Okay, any further discussion on that?
So does your motion include the masks on buses or?
No.
Your,
No,
your
they-
motion.
Honestly, Dana,
I'm just-
I know in our buses, they're not having, but yeah, no, it does compute.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm saying our buses is in our personal bus.
No,
Sorry, so, if you might or Amanda, but is that 15-minute time? Is that what you want to do?
No.
yes.
Is it? Yeah.
Let's listen to Amanda.
Amanda, did you hear that question?
I'm getting a lot of feedback. I can't really hear anything.
Can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay, the question is, the 15 minutes, is it cumulative through a 24-hour period, or what does that mean, the 15 minutes?
Yes, it is for a 24-hour period. So it's a cumulative of 15 minutes. So if somebody's coming in and out of that 6 feet space for a 24-hour period.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody need clarification on that? I think the simplest thing in this case would be to show hands.
Jeanette's raising her hand.
What?
Charlie is ready to go.
Okay, Charlie. Did you, number one, did you hear that motion? Any comments about that or comments in general?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I can barely hear you guys. I just wanted to say I appreciate everybody's comments on this. It's a tough decision. One question I had was, if the board decides to go with the variance, what's the timeline from the time we apply to the time we're granted?
Amanda, did you hear that question?
Yeah, so I can't guarantee how quickly it will be, but Alexia Harris did say that it will be moved very quickly. So we would just need the signatures and present it to her. I'm guessing it could be a week to 2 weeks, but I'm really not 100% sure.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had right now, guys.
Thanks, Charlie.
I can read the letters. I don't know if you have, the health order was connected, I think attached to the board docs, but as I understand it, Casey's motion is to ask for a variance to opt out of the requirement, letter B, which is the face coverings. B is the face coverings. C, again, connected with all the face covering requirements and exceptions. D, the last sentence, which has face covering shall be worn with during transportation. It leaves in the first sentence, which says 6 feet of spacing during transportation shall be maintained as much as practicable. And item E, which is the indoor events by visitors and other adults and so on, we're asking for an exemption from that deal. And then G is, we're not asking for an exemption from people that are sick. So basically, we're asking for an exemption or a variance from item B, C, the last sentence of D and E. I think that,
And Jim, clarify for the audience, most districts have asked for a variance for all of it. Okay.
there are a couple that did not ask for the hand washing, but I mean, that's a big point. So yes, most of them have just said A through G.
Thank you.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to apply for variance with those stipulations through the county health office. Casey? How do you vote?
In favor. I made the motion.
All right, so I'm gonna ask, Cassie? Paul?
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
I'll vote aye. Sorry? Sorry, votes aye. Okay, motion carries. All right, that is it.
Should we do a separate one for graduation then?
I think the only reason.
Let's ditch it.
Yeah, you have to dance way far.
I think maybe prudent to ask for variance for graduation for all of the.
Yes.
Yes, maybe a motion. Which we need a motion.
I motion that we apply for a variance from all of those standards for graduations.
Second.
Second to apply for a motion for all those provisions A through G for the purpose of high school graduations. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
So I just want to say, everyone pray.
Yeah.
Dr. Copeland, I would ask you that when we find out from you send out emails.
Sure.
Which I'm sure you will, but I always ask that.
Staff and administration definitely very concerned. It's not, as Bill said, somebody said it's not a huge issue. Okay, the only other thing we have to talk about is staff issues. Anybody that's here strictly for the health ordinance variance, we want to make us feel bad if you need. You're welcome to stay. We're happy to have this. We actually have a meeting every month. Thank you. So thank you guys for coming and providing.
Thank you. Especially thank you for the graduation variance.
All right. Item 4 is an executive session. Personnel issues. So we need a motion for that.
Chair, I move that we executive session to discuss personnel issues, consider confidential by law, and consider tendering offers concerning wages, salary, benefits, and terms of employment, and consider the offer of teachers, staff, administrative companies.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to discuss personnel issues, consider confidential by law, consider tendering offers, consider wages, salary, benefits, and terms of employment, and consider the offer of teacher, staff, administrative contracts. There will be action taken after the executive session. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We'll have an executive session back in the white room.
It's in the shower room. It's the one on the right.
We Move the second to come out of executive session and approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Here now. Motion carries. Okay, item 6A is to discuss and consider budget issues pending in the Wyoming State Legislature. That's not really finalized at this time, so we are gonna wait for that update to the regularly scheduled board meeting next April. That we actually have the plan. Item B would be consider offering teacher and licensed staff contracts for the 2021-2022 school year.
Chair, I move that we approve the following resolution. And it's recommending a reduction in force. It says, whereas Carver County School District Number 2 District has determined there is a decrease in the size of faculty due to increased enrollment which exists or is imminent, and whereas in the 2021 school year, as of April 5th, 2021, there were only 42 students district-wide enrolled in Spanish. It is believed this is due in part because foreign language is no longer being required for Hathaway scholarship. The needs of the district students can be served by one Spanish teacher. And whereas the district has determined that a change in the financial condition of the district exists or is imminent, specifically the declining average daily membership, ADM, for the district on which the state funding model is based, currently 580, the lowest ADM in 5 years, and whereas due to the decrease in the size of faculty due to decreased enrollment which exists or is imminent, and due to a change in the financial condition of the district which exists or is imminent, the district has determined a reduction in force is necessary. And whereas pursuant to policy GCPA, the district has attempted to address this reduction through natural attrition or transfers, and whereas the district currently employs 2 Spanish teachers. Of the 2 Spanish teachers in the district, Heather Biggs has the lesser seniority date. Specifically, Heather Biggs' seniority date is 2017, while the district's other Spanish teachers' seniority date is 2008. Based upon the teacher's certification and endorsements, there are no other teaching positions to transfer her to. Now therefore be it resolved as follows, that consistent with the district's RIF policy, Heather Biggs shall be given written notification that her position and employment with the district shall be recommended to be terminated due to a reduction in force effective at the end of the current school year. Said notice will contain an advertisement of the teacher's right to file a written request for hearing within 7 days after receipt of the notice of recommendation of termination. If the teacher elects to have a hearing, the purpose of this hearing is to allow the teacher to challenge the termination under the district's RIF policy. Specifically to challenge if this RIF is appropriate due to a decrease in the size of faculty, due to a decreased enrollment which exists or is imminent, and or due to a change in the financial condition of the district which exists or is imminent, and that the teacher has less seniority, and that there is not an available position within the district for which the teacher possesses the required certification. If a request for hearing is not timely made, then this recommendation shall be made at the April 19th, 2021 board meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend a reduction in force for the Spanish teacher, the Biggs. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we terminate initial teacher Ella Withers. Second.
Moved and seconded to terminate initial teacher Ella Withers. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve contracts for the following teachers for the 2021-2022 school year. Ian Cancel, encampment, Daniel Greenwood, encampment, Paul Switzer, encampment, Captain Munson, encampment, and SMHS. Lauren Colligan, Medicine Bow, Janelle Moore, AGS. Deborah McCoy, AGS. Caitlin Logan, AGM. Alyssa Lewis, AGM. Darcy Becca, SES. Bailey Laughlin, SES. Walker Williams, SES. Marissa Paul, SES. Ivy Palmer, SES. Nicole Schneider, SES. Ellie Stolberg, SES. Jamie Reed, SES. Tara Zolliker, SMHS. Cynthia Tuska, SMHS. Kevin Cancel, encampment. Kendall Tom, SES. And Heather Oxford, SES.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the contracts for those teachers mentioned for the 2021-2022 school year. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve a contract for Angela Albritton, school counselor, Dario Soto, an hourly teacher, and Nikki Thorne, school nurse.
Moved and seconded to approve the contracts for Angela Albritton, Dario Soto, and Nikki Thorne. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. That is the last of our business. We will not set a special meeting date. So the next meeting of the board will be the regularly scheduled board meeting, Monday, April 19th at 5 p.m. here at the Pine Valley Community Center. This meeting is adjourned.